Well, we've got some breaking news in Blues land. Doug Armstrong and the St. Louis Blues have officially fired head coach Drew Bannister and replaced him by hiring Jim Montgomery to a 5-year contract. This is huge news for a Blues team that's struggling to perform this season and is trying to emerge successfully from their current retool beyond this season. What does this mean for the Blues this year, and what does it mean for them beyond? Alec and I are going to talk about all that and more today on Note News. Oh boy, it only took 5 days after Jim Montgomery was fired by the Boston Bruins for Doug Armstrong and the Blues to snatch him up. Um, this is big news. This is the biggest news all year since the season started for the Blues, making a head coaching change. We're going to talk about all of what it means today. But before we get into it, if you're new to Note News, we'd appreciate if you would like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow and rate the podcast wherever you listen, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the best way to support us, so we really appreciate that. And the best way to follow along with us is on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, where we'll post announcements, graphics, memes, videos, stuff like that. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, then follow us along there. Alec, it's pretty funny. We recorded an episode last night before the Blues played the Islanders where we had a discussion. Should the Blues move on from Drew Bannister? Should they hire Jim Montgomery? And woke up to the news today that they did just that. So here we are. What do you think?
I can't believe we got him. I really am over the moon. I didn't think that this was like possible that he would want to come to St. Louis just with his resume and his career so far. But yeah, this is definitely a huge hire for the team, for the franchise, for the organization. Um, but I think it also signals some interesting things as we'll, break down the contract length and all that sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, what an embarrassing showing for the Boston Bruins, and for us to be the team that profits off them is just so. The irony is just beautiful. It writes itself, and it is truly beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It really is. I saw like their last three head coaches they've fired
Yeah.
and have been rehired within like 8 days, all three of them.
Hmm.
So it is just confusing for the Bruins. We'll get into why he was fired in a little bit. We'll start to talk about Jim Montgomery in a little bit. But first, I wanted to talk about Drew Bannister, who has been relieved of his duties as head coach, of course. So he finishes in 76 games as head coach going back to last season with a record of 39, 31, and 6. So a winning record, just slightly, but a winning record. And this season, in 22 games, the team is sitting at 9, 12, and 1, a losing record, of course. And it's been rough for the past couple weeks or so for Drew Bannister and the Blues. So I want to talk about why he was hired first. Given like the timing of everything between Jim Montgomery's firing and now subsequent hiring, but also given some of the comments that Doug Armstrong made today in his press conference, it seems like really the only reason that Bannister was fired is because Jim Montgomery became available. So, I mean, right or wrong, Armstrong thinks that this Blues team can make the playoffs, and he thinks Jim Montgomery's a better candidate to lead the Blues there. And then obviously signing him to such a long deal, thinks he's a better candidate for the Blues long term. Alec, what's your take on that? Just that Bannister was pretty much fired just because Montgomery became available.
It's I I think it's mostly speculation, but I would say my opinion is that I guess it's certainly possible. We know that Montgomery obviously had a very close record with, or close was very close with Armstrong and all the guys. So it's certainly possible, and I think that um, that there it could even be likely, and I do think people are still or people have been calling for Bannister's job for a while now, excuse me. Mostly online. It seemed like the team wasn't really making any declarative statements either way about that, so it's hard to really infer whether or not this was just a Jim Montgomery thing. Definitely there was a world where the Blues move on from Bannister and don't land Montgomery. So I do think it's I hate to say it's just both, but I do think there's probably an element of both sides here. But yeah, I think probably Montgomery accelerated the timetable.
For sure. I mean, I agree that it is both, but I will say that Doug Armstrong like kind of flat out said in his press conference, like I woke up on Wednesday not planning to make a coaching change, um, and really like this was based almost entirely on Jim Montgomery being available. You can sort of argue whether or not that is 100% true because I do think there were some issues in Drew Bannister's coaching performance that made the decision definitely more easy. So we can sort of dive into that now, but I just want to say that this is kind of like a tough break for Bannister. I don't think he
Yeah,
he was
for
a
sure.
bad head coach, and he like last season when he took over as head coach, he really turned this team around and led them to a playoff push. They did not make the playoffs, of course, but they came very close. They were one of the first teams out of the playoffs last season after an abysmal start to the season. So, um, you know, props to Bannister for turning the team around last season. And overall, I don't think he's a bad head coach necessarily. I just think Montgomery's a better one. And you know, all the best, but best wishes to Bannister. I hope he lands on his feet somewhere else and is able to find some success. So, um, what for you was the biggest issue with Drew Bannister as head coach of the Blues?
I think there were two issues. That being special teams and line like construction. I'll talk about the line construction because if I had to pick one, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's probably that because I think special teams is more of a organizational choice and like Claude Julien is part of that too than just um, line combinations. But just Bannister didn't really allow the team to develop a lot of chemistry. There was so much like mixing and matching, experimentation that didn't really answer any questions. It more just brought up more questions, a lot of them falling back on Bannister.
Mm-hmm.
And so the just not allowing guys to develop chemistry, not really seeing what we have in like an evaluation year, just kind of felt out of place. It felt honestly like maybe the way you would run something like an AHL team because you are trying to get these guys in different positions to see what kind of players they are. But here in the NHL, like you're really supposed to let the stars shine, let talent be talent, and not
Mm-hmm.
ask too much of a it's just overcomplicating the system, and I think that was sort of Bannister's undoing was just doing too much and not really coaching like an NHL coach.
I would, excuse me, I would agree, especially for like younger guys that are clearly NHL level. Like I'm thinking Jake Neighbors, Dylan Holloway, Alexander Texier, and Zachary Bolduc, guys like that who shouldn't be in the AHL. They belong here with the Blues, especially this season anyway. And when there's so much shakeup and you don't allow them to, as you said, build that chemistry, that can be really tough for those young players who ideally will be a part of the long-term picture for this team. So I think it's important to sort of help them, carve out a role on the team. Jake Neighbors so far has had the most success doing that. It's like setting up his tent in front of the opposing net and knocking in goals that way, which has been, really great to see him emerge last season. So I'm thinking like especially like early on in the season, those top line combinations, the young players that he was mixing in and out on that top line with Robert Thomas, who is an elite player and can probably, successfully make plays with anyone on that top line. But I think it's a bigger struggle for those younger guys who didn't have that consistency, as you said. So I would agree on that one as well. I think there were some related questionable roster decisions, namely pulling Jordan Kyrou against Buffalo in that overtime loss. I think in favor of Oscar Sundqvist was the move.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in a couple games prior, Jordan Kyrou had some pretty bad giveaways that cost the Blues, and it's understandable to try to address that. But I think that was just the wrong way to go about that. When we talked yesterday, I sort of made the point that Jordan Kyrou ideally is going to be a franchise player for you moving forward. Sign him to this long-term contract, and he
Something would
is
have to go pretty wrong if that doesn't happen.
exactly, and he's the leading goal scorer. You can argue whether or not 6 goals should be the leading goal scorer at this point, but he is. And so I think the better thing for Jordan Kyrou, the player, and the better thing for the St. Louis Blues long term would be to help him develop confidence in a situation like that where he's messed up, and I'm sure he knows he's messed up. But leave him in there. He's a goal scorer, and when you're in such a tight game, you need a goal just as much as the other team does. So I just think that was a pretty questionable decision, and not sure one that I would have made. But I am definitely not an NHL head coach, so. Um, but I think there were a lot of people that were pretty confused by that. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen from special teams? We broke it down, I believe, in one of our previous episodes, some of the issues with the penalty kill and the power play. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you had to say there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Bannister's special teams and the Blues special teams has just been this sort of passive nature that they've been playing on the power play. Really letting the other team come to them and just not really establishing much of a threatening cycle or getting any consistency going offensively. And their second power play unit, I believe I said on the episode, is just horrendous, which isn't
Mhm.
Bannister's fault. That I think is more of a roster construction thing. But boy, it's a tough watch and it's a
Yeah.
tough unit to have out there. Um, but um, yeah, I think that's been the biggest issue on the power play, and then on penalty kill, it's again just playing passively and like trying to do, trying to do too much and essentially allowing the team to do the opposing power play to do whatever you want to them. And we talked about
Yeah.
like trying to block shots and everything, sure, but what that really does is it doesn't allow you to or it allows for more random things to happen. And so the Blues have had very middling to poor special teams this year, which is why Montgomery, it's one of, I would say, his strengths is coaching a special teams unit. Now this season Boston ranks also very poorly,
Mhm.
and you could put that as a mark against Montgomery's record, but I think he showed enough both in St. Louis and in Boston before that he can make a really good unit with, okay talent. The question is like the talent we have is really poor. Can he
Mhm.
elevate it to being okay? That remains to be seen. But at least, yeah. So back on Bannister, it's just that they pretty much didn't ever dictate the pace of play. And
Yeah.
when you have a man advantage, that's the name of the game. So just a overall poor decision.
Yeah, I would agree. The biggest point there, I think, is just allowed the other team to dictate the pace of play. So that was really the biggest issue. It was just it never seemed like they were very confident or secure or had much of a plan on either special teams unit. So definitely difficult to watch, to say the least. I think over the course of this season, but also over the course of um, these last 9 games or so, where they've lost 7 of those 9. They've been outscored 34-18 in that stretch as well, and outshot. And so it's just been a difficult couple weeks for the Blues and a difficult couple weeks for Drew Bannister, who, in his defense, I mean, doesn't have a fantastic roster. especially without Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg, who have been out with injury for a while. Thank goodness Robert Thomas is back. Philip Broberg also looks to be ahead of schedule, and hopefully we'll see him sometime soon. But really, I mean, it's just a tough situation all around for Drew Bannister. Sort of in his defense, as I said, I think a good head coach can adjust maybe a little bit better than that, than he did. But um, I think I think you sort of broke it down well with the special teams, especially in the line combinations and just the lack of offense. It seemed like for whatever reason, Drew Bannister just was unable to get this Blues team to shoot the puck. Right? They are not taking chances at 5-on-5 or in the power play, and it's just been tough to watch. I think so, and it just didn't seem like he had a lot of answers. Like looking at his post game interview last night against the New York Islanders, it seemed like he was sort of lost, and didn't really have much to say on that front. So um, it's a tough situation, like I said, but I mean, I think it's fair to demand more from your head coach, especially at this level. So, anything else you want to add on Bannister before we talk about the new guy?
Um, I think just that. Excuse me. I do want to echo the point you made earlier that like he was given a really really hard job,
Yeah.
and we can't entirely blame uh, Bannister for the roster construction around him, but it's just that point of there wasn't any elevating or even just like stabilizing of this roster. It felt like there was
Hmm.
more destabilizing. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, like you said, he's a good head coach, just not really a great one. And this team has high aspirations and isn't content to let an opportunity like this pass them by. Which credit to Alex Dean, Doug Armstrong, and everyone in the front office there. Um, but I think we can get to the exciting stuff.
Yeah, like you said, credit to those guys for being aggressive. We sort of made the point that the Boston Bruins probably have some bigger issues when it comes to like upper level management, firing those three head coaches who were all were all pretty good head coaches, I think you'd say. Um, but the Blues have now fired two head coaches within a year or so. How is that situation different in your mind than the Bruins, for example?
Well, I think there's something to be said that it isn't entirely different, because this Ross, I don't want to say that Montgomery is going to come in and suddenly fix everything, and that this now we're set up to be good forever for the rest of time as long as Montgomery is our head coach. Because there are some rosters, there are some difficulties and holes, pretty big holes on this roster that need to be filled. But I
Hmm.
think the main thing is that Berube, the context of those firings was so important. Boston having fired their two head coaches who were like the winningest head coaches in their tenure, and coach of the year winners, and them literally having the greatest team in NHL history. Um, it's not like the Blues under Berube ever had the greatest team in NHL history. Even
Hmm.
when they won the cup, they were pretty much the greatest team for half that season,
Sure.
plus the playoffs. So I think it's the context is really important because it was pretty clear that Berube's time was done. This team was just kind of tired of playing for him, and he was a great head coach, and he's managing himself well in Toronto now, proving that he's still a great head coach. That was just kind of a right time, right situation. And I think
Hmm.
this is the same thing, that this is just the right time, right situation. As I said, like the opportunity was there and they seized the opportunity. Versus Boston, it feels more like scrambling to create an opportunity when usually firing a head coach is not a good way to do that. But
Yeah, I'd agree. All good points there. I don't think I have anything to add. So, why don't we go ahead and talk about, as I said, the new guy who is also kind of the old guy, a familiar face here in St. Louis, um, Jim Montgomery. he has been signed to a 5-year contract with the St. Louis Blues. So he'll take over as head coach effective immediately. First game against the New York Rangers tomorrow on Monday, I believe. Do I have that right? Um,
Yeah.
in New York. So big game for sure. And he is planning to address the media tomorrow morning. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Um, so I think that the Blues probably wanted to try and hire him this past offseason when they gave Drew Bannister the job. Um, I think this could be like a little bit tinfoil hat, and I know some other people have talked about this around online, but um, when you look at the timing of the Bannister hiring, right, compared with Jim Montgomery's timing with the Bruins at that point, there were some questions about whether Montgomery would retain his role as head coach with the Bruins if they had a first round exit in the playoffs. And they did not. They advanced to the second round of the playoffs on May 4th. So obviously, the Bruins kept rolling with him, but the Blues felt that they were in a position that they needed to go ahead and get their head coaching situation figured out. So that person had an offseason to prepare and work with the players for the upcoming season. So 3 days later, after the Bruins advanced, the Blues went ahead and hired Drew Bannister on May 7th. So I think they really wanted him last season, and I think the speed with which they jumped on him this time around is sort of a further indication that they really thought Montgomery could be the guy. So I think it's important to answer the question, why was Montgomery fired? There could be some people out there that think, well, he was just fired by a team that was good. In the past couple seasons, why don't they want him? And why would we want him if he was fired? Well, my answer to that is that the Boston Bruins this season are a team with expectations. They did not expect to be 10-9-3 at this point. I think they expected to be a little more, a little better, and have something a little more to show for it, especially in the wins column. And they don't. They're struggling on a number of levels, and you can't really fire the players. So I guess their answer was just to fire the head coach. I think it was a mistake. I think Doug Armstrong thinks it was a mistake, and I'm glad he's here. But also, they were trying to extend Jim Montgomery in the off season. There were extension talks that were kind of going nowhere. So if he's not, a sure thing beyond this season, and you're struggling this season and you're looking to shake something up, typically firing the head coach is what happens. So I don't think him being fired is an indication of him being a bad head coach. I think it's more of an indictment on the performance of the Bruins roster this season. So we can get into that in a little bit, but um, I think we should break down why hiring Jim Montgomery was a good decision. Starting with just the record. I mean, his track record with the Bruins is he finished with a 120, 41, and 23 record. That's a 6.56 winning percentage and a 7.15 points percentage. The Bruins had the best record in hockey from the point that Montgomery was hired until he was fired. Best record in hockey, definitely helped by that 2022-23 season when he led the Boston Bruins to a NHL record, 65 wins. But still, that is a fantastic record for Montgomery, who, I mean, is a fantastic coach, right? Do you have anything to add as to like why this was a good decision for the Blues to go ahead and snatch him up?
I mean, I feel like I could say anything and everything. Just like in terms of your first point on why the Bruins fired him, to be honest, there is no good answer. I don't know, and I think pretty much everyone in the NHL sphere outside of Boston is also like, this is a bit of a head scratcher because yeah, he was like one of the best coaches in the league, and they got off to a slow start, but he had only been there. This was his third season in Boston. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why he was out, which is a good plus as to why he's in for us because he is still one of the best head coaches in the league. A very forward-thinking young mind who helped build some really good offense in St. Louis, and and Dallas was struggling before that, but still like has seen the modern era of the NHL adapt, and Boston, really figured out how to beat that, and Jim Montgomery was the architect of that. So yeah, I mean, this is just like I can't think of a bad thing to say about having Montgomery as our coach, especially because of how long we have him signed for, which is a really long time for a head coach. But that's good because you got to make sure he's going to stick around um, and buy into this retool as the Blues go through it. But his to me, what I want to talk about is kind of his calling card being the solid pace of play. I think that those blue teams of the past always played very hard, very physical, forechecking hockey, and really dictated that pace of play. And I think part of pace of play, like I said earlier, is special teams. Montgomery has had a really stellar record with special teams for the most part. So going back to his first season in St. Louis, or his most recent season in St. Louis, 2021-22, when we should have had another. The Blues were second in the league on the power play at 27%, just behind the Maple Leafs, who are 27.3 or 0.4, and were fifth in penalty kill at 84%. Then his first season in Boston, they were 12th in the league at 22.2% on the power play, but first in the league on the penalty kill at 87.3%. And last year, they were fourth on the power play at the same 22.2% mark, which is ironic, and seventh on the penalty kill at 82.5%. So he's shown a really good ability to do a phenomenal job with good talent on special teams coaching. This year, when the talent dropped off and just players weren't playing up to their standard more so, the Bruins really struggled. And I think that's a point you can definitely make, but
Mm-hmm.
it does feel like more of them not executing rather than the structure being bad. And I think the 1/4 of a season of bad play versus 3 straight seasons of elite coaching um, should be more than enough to sway to um, say that Montgomery is a really good coach and a really good special teams coach too.
Yeah, like you said, not so great this year for the Bruins, whose power play is literally the worst in the league by
Last
percentage. Yeah, at 12.8%. But their penalty kill is a little more respectable, sitting at 19th with 77.9%, and better than the Blues by any means. So um, a little bit better. Definitely concerning, and definitely a question mark for Montgomery. But I think, like you said, in his defense, there's been a bit of a drop off when it comes to uh, the availability of talent on that Bruins roster and the performance of players, like you said, up to their norms. In particular, I'm looking at the center position for them. That's sort of dropped off. They signed Elias Lindholm to a pretty significant contract, and he has pretty much been a non-factor up to this point. It seems like. And then also you look at goaltending, right? Um, Going back the past few seasons, that goaltending tandem of Jeremy Swayman and Linus Olmark has been one of the best in the NHL, if not the best. Obviously, Olmark winning a Vezina, Jeremy Swayman sort of emerging last year as the go-to guy. Um, and Olmark is now gone. He's been traded away in a sort of questionable trade. And then Jeremy Swayman's preseason RFA negotiations have sort of carried over into a poor start to the season for him. He does not have a good save percentage or goals saved above expected mark. And so, you know, when they're not performing up to their career norms like that, that can be huge, especially at the goaltending position, which is probably um, I say probably, definitely the most important position on the ice for a team to be successful. So that's been tough. That's been tough for sure. So on that front, I'm giving Montgomery the benefit of the doubt. Um, but I think there remain there are question marks remaining about whether that will improve in St. Louis, who have some of the same issues, uh, particularly center depth and struggling goaltending this year. Bennington and Hofer were fantastic last year. We've talked a lot about that, um, but this year aren't really performing at the same level. So there are some question marks there, but I like how you laid out his sort of calling card of special teams excellence in the past few seasons is a direct fit for the Blues when it comes to one of their biggest issues. Another one that I want to highlight as one of their biggest issues is just offense at even strength. Offense at 5-on-5 has been tough for the Blues. They have a really low goals scored per game rate, and it's just been bad for the Blues offensively, especially at 5-on-5. Um, and the Boston Bruins under Jim Montgomery, looking at the past two seasons in particular, in 2022-23, they had the sixth highest expected goals percentage with 53.77. They had 200 goals scored, second most in the league, and 2,058 shots on goal, which was 11th most. They were also 81st percentile in zone time for all three zones, which is kind of funny. All three at 81st percentile, pretty consistent there. And they also excelled in high danger and mid range shots on goal, ranking above average in both of those metrics, which has been not something we can say for the Blues this season. Now looking at last season, a bit of a step back, but still decent and definitely better than the Blues. In 2023-24, the Bruins had an expected goal percentage of 49.94, down to 18th, but their 176 goals scored ranked 10th in the league. Their zone time percentiles also sort of took a dip last season, but this season are sort of back into the above average area, which is good. It's good to see that adjustment from Montgomery, and they've last year continued to excel in high danger shots on goal. That trend continues into this season, and they're also last season were tied for the most rebound goals at 31, which I think would sure be great if the Blues could get that going a little bit as well. So a lot of stats just to throw into the discussion here that I just rattled off, but ultimately I think that all points to a potential improvement for the Blues at 5-on-5 when it comes to offense. So that's what I'm looking for as well, as a potential improvement point for the Blues with Montgomery moving in.
And I think the exciting thing there that you brought up is, at least to me, what stuck out to me was the high danger shots that the
Yeah,
Blues have been very poor at creating. If anything, like even in the games where they do fire pucks on net and get shots, they're really not any like high danger shots at all. It's just rifling stuff in from the point or in the slot, but at like a weird angle or just a contested look that tenders just have no problem snatching up. There was just no creativity and real like offensive creation. It felt like they were just like slamming their head against a brick wall trying to score goals. And with Montgomery now, I'm looking to see some actual offensive play design and creativity and create some offense more than just throwing pucks towards the back of the net.
yeah, absolutely. On that point, like with the good numbers when it comes to high danger chances and the good numbers when it comes to rebound goals. Um, like like I'm hoping Jake Neighbors can just do his thing, because that's sort of his thing is like I said, setting up camp right there, and hopefully he'll get some more of those chances as well. Another thing that I think sort of made this more urgent for the Blues, just a small point I wanted to throw in, is that there were some other teams that were probably looking to snatch Montgomery up. I'm thinking the Red Wings, Montreal, Canadiens, the Pittsburgh Penguins. maybe even the Nashville Predators? Question mark. Probably not, but they've been struggling too, and could be looking to make a change. So I think when you look at sort of that picture as well, it uh, sort of helps clear the timing up, especially. 5 days is not a long time. And it's pretty clear that Doug Armstrong and the Blues really liked him. And so, yeah, he's in. Like I said, 5 years. One of the questions I had was, as sort of rumors were swirling about whether or not the Blues would do this, um, was are you hiring? Would the Blues be hiring Montgomery to save this season, or are they hiring him for the long term? I think if the answer is you're hiring him to save this season more than anything, that's probably the wrong reason, and that's why I'm glad to see that they signed him to a 5-year deal. I think that number in particular is huge for the Blues. I think Doug Armstrong is probably thinking that this team could be competitive this year. I'm no longer of the opinion that they would make the playoffs this season necessarily. Obviously, I would love if they did, but I don't think that'll happen anymore. Um, so I'm not sure, that would be the right rationale to do this. But like I said, the fact that it's a 5-year deal makes me feel a lot better. He's going to be around a while. What's your take on the length of that contract? Do you think it's a good thing overall, or do you think that might be a little bit long for a guy like Montgomery?
I still just can't believe we got him. Like I'm still just trying to like wrap my head around that. I just wow, what a plus. Like I have so much faith in this front office. But anyways, to actually respond to your question, I love it. I love it, and it's a long deal for a head coach, especially to hire someone mid-season for that long, is kind of unprecedented, but totally makes sense given the context. A and B is absolutely the right move because of what you said. That Montgomery's bought into this retool, and that's just awesome. That is
Yeah,
unbelievable. I don't know how they spun it. I guess he just really, really is like was really looking to get back with this franchise and back in this city. And I mean,
yeah,
if that's not what you want from your head coach, like this is our guy, and he fought to be here. That how cool is that? When has St. Louis ever been able to say that like people wanted to be here and like sought it out? Anyways,
Albert
so I'm
Pujols.
I'm still yeah, well, I'm still wrapping my head around all of that. But the length is really crucial here because this means that he's bought into the long term, and he's willing to coach up this team into the future. Now, what I do think what you brought up that is unfortunate is that I do think this kind of, in my opinion, nullifies the rest of this season in terms of results and expectations. Because I mean, unless somehow this roster that's been constructed that we've said has some holes, can really like just turn it around and go on a crazy run when I don't know that I see that happening. Like you said, our leading goal scorer has 6 goals. Colton Parayko's having a great year, but the rest of the
For
defense is
sure.
pretty much just like hanging on.
Mhm.
I don't know that I see them getting a lot better. Binnington and Hofer could turn it around, admittedly, which would help win some games
For
and
sure.
maybe put us in a wild card contention. But even then, like that 2019 run was really special, but that was a really good team too. Like they were underperforming because they were a really well constructed team with a really scary offensive core and just huge defensemen that could play the position the right way.
Yeah.
The way that this roster is built is just so small and so like finesse. There's no like power to this team, which is a necessary component that I'm not sure that like expecting even making the playoffs would really break my expectations. And the other thing about hiring Jim Montgomery is this probably ruins our chances of like a real tank season, getting like a top 8 pick or so. But in my opinion, that's a good thing. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people mostly just want the high draft pick to get a better prospect, and I get that. But I don't know. I have some pride as a sports fan, and I want to see my team win. Excuse me. but yeah, I think that the thing is that this, geez, stutter. I think the thing is that this kind of nullifies the rest of this season, because at this point it is going to be just more assessment and more figuring out what we have in Montgomery. We'll definitely like let the lines do more what they want to do and what they have to do, and we'll see what we have going forward. But really, as in terms of a successful outcome for the season, it's really, I don't even know what like a successful outcome would be, because in my opinion it's just going to be evaluate, evaluate, evaluate. And I think this team knows, and I think the front office knows, that playoffs are out of the question. um, there's some interesting contract decisions coming up, like Buchnevic's modified no trade clause ends after this season, and becomes a full no trade clause next season.
Hmm.
Brandon Saad's next season becomes a modified and 15 or 12 team list instead of a full no trade list. So,
Hmm.
there's decisions to be made about some of the additions we brought in this offseason, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that this roster and this team like aren't really ready to hang just yet, which is
Hmm.
why I just can't believe we got Montgomery. And I think the front office knows that. So yeah, I do think for this season it makes the outcome mostly just like we're kind of just watching hockey. Like there's no really bigger implications in my mind as of right now. We'll see if Montgomery and the boys can just totally prove me wrong. But I'm going to be watching very closely on guys like Bolduc, Jake Neighbors, Dylan Holloway is a big one. I think Holloway is going to be a really key piece. Is if they can get that kind of production to have him fit a role that Boston may have had. I don't want to say like Pasternak, because that's just an insane comparison to make. But if he can be more of a contributor, I'm not really sure what the comparison would be. But someone who can like, yeah, I'm repeating myself. Essentially, I think the outcome for this season doesn't really matter, and it's just going to be evaluation.
I I think I would personally push back a little bit on that. I think that the sort of speed with which they jumped on Montgomery, the caliber of coach that he is, um, and some of the comments and just general vibes from Doug Armstrong, uh, maybe point to the fact that right or wrong, um, they want to get back in it and they're going to try. And I think if anyone can do it, it's probably a guy like Montgomery, which I think it's a step up from Bannister. We'll see if it becomes more disruption. And I think if it becomes more of a disruption than an immediate improvement, you may be right. This season could be nullified in that way. I would almost prefer that they sort of take the rest of the season to evaluate and see what you have from these young players. But I'm not so sure that's what we're going to see. Honestly, I think some of the late season or late off season moves, particularly bringing in Broberg and Holloway, maybe convinced Doug Armstrong that this team could make a run if everything goes according to plan. Um, and I don't think he's quite given up on that. But I think you and I are in agreement on the point that a tank is the wrong thing for this team. Because even if you do net a top pick in the upcoming 2025 draft, it's not it's probably not going to be a very good player. I think by all indications at this point, this upcoming draft class isn't really as good as some of the past few years. So um, if we would be getting a top pick, I would have wanted it to be last season when there were so many defensemen at the top of the class. But um, you know that is what it is. I think that and as we've discussed multiple times on here, what is the better thing for this team is to build a winning culture, to have something to play for, and to do that while some of these young guys like a Neighbors, a Holloway, as you said, and hopefully Broberg when he comes back, to let those guys develop, and to form habits as winning players, right? To build that mindset of the standard that should be established, which is a winning one. And I think that is far more valuable than just landing, one solid player at the top of the draft, in my opinion. You also look at teams like the Detroit Red Wings, the Montreal Canadiens in particular, who have just been stuck in neutral, or spinning their tires on their current rebuilds. Um, they tanked. They got some high draft picks and got some good players. Like you can't say that some of their young players you can't say that they don't have any good young players, but um, I mean they didn't get like an icon, like a franchise icon level player, like a Connor Bedard or someone like that, from their rebuilds, and they're just struggling to get back into contention, to climb the standings again. Um, and I'm not so sure that we want to see that in St. Louis. I think that would be the wrong move, for a team that probably isn't going to be as willing to sort of spin their way it back into contention. It would take a lot, I think, for a St. Louis Blues team to recover from something like that. So we sort of got more into general organizational talk there, but overall, I think Montgomery could be a guy that could get them back into it, or at least make things interesting this season. I'm not saying that's what I think will happen. I'm not saying that's what I want to happen necessarily, but I think it could. I think it could. Um, I think that's within the realm of possibility. I mean, we saw it last year from Drew Bannister, right? He got them back into things, and I think Montgomery is a better head coach, than Drew Bannister is.
Yeah.
Um, and so, if anyone can do it, it could be a guy like him. But like you said, I'm really excited for the lessons that he takes away, the relationships he builds with these players this season, and what he learns about this roster, what this roster learns about him moving forward, and what it could mean for the long term. We'll talk about the long term in just a second. I do want to touch a little bit more on the remainder of this season first. So my biggest question for you, Alec, is what do you want to see from Montgomery and from this Blues team under Montgomery this season, for the remainder of this season?
hmm Yeah, I think what I want to see is pretty much like the not Bannister of changing around the roster a lot, and also some more active special teams play. Pretty much just highlighting what the weaknesses were and at least trying something new. If it doesn't work, then the talent is what the talent is, but not being content to just let everything come to them and not ever dictate the pace of play, because that's how you underachieve as a team. I also do want to make the point that like on Montgomery, in my opinion, this season, like I think all this does is it sort of resets the timeline to this coming off season. I don't think I'm saying that like the team isn't playing for playoffs or isn't playing to win. I think they are. It's just that I think Montgomery coming in and doing things his way, with a roster that only like half has played under Montgomery before, that it's going to take some, there's going to be an adjustment period for the players to try and pick up this entirely new system and new way of doing things that might be pretty difficult. So just because it's in season, like it's kind of awkward timing. That's all I'm saying, is that like I think
Yeah.
there's a limiter as to how good this can truly be this season. But yeah, I think that I'm also going to be looking for, pretty much like I said, cleaning up the deficiencies of special teams play, of playing the neutral zone, of giving up giveaways at such a
Mhm.
high rate. And also, I'm going to be looking at some of these, younger players being more focus pieces of this team. Like I mentioned, Bolduc, Holloway, what we might see from other young forwards, or and I'm going to start this agenda now. Philip Broberg on the first power play, quarterbacking the first power play, because I think it should be, and I think Montgomery will. Once he comes back, if he looks good to go like he was when he left, yeah, I want Broberg on the first power play. So
Very interesting.
that's that's what I'm looking for.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how he addresses some of the biggest issues that we've seen with this team. We talked about it already. Special teams, 5-on-5. We don't need to really get into that stuff. I mean, defense as well. We've talked at length on here, already today and in previous episodes about those issues for the Blues. But I'm just really looking forward to how he addresses those, and how he adjusts to some of the struggles that the Blues have seen so far this season, because I think he showed somewhat of an inability to adjust to the Bruins' struggles this season, which is a little concerning. I'm not saying that I think he'll be unable to, but as we sort of laid out, the Blues have had, or the Bruins have had some similar issues that the Blues have had this season, and so um, I think Montgomery is coming to a worse team, and I'm not so sure what's going to happen on that front, but I'm hoping that sort of a clean slate and a new team, a new situation could maybe um, I don't know, make things more interesting. I think he also has more experience with players like Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, and Pavel Buchnevich from his time with the Blues previously. Really helped them blossom into really good offensive players. Um, and really, I'm just hoping he gets them to shoot the puck more. That's what I want to see. Honestly, more than anything, I think that could solve a lot of issues if they just shoot the puck. Um, so those are some more, I guess, more specific things. But why don't we shift to talking about the long term really quick? What do we want to see from Jim Montgomery beyond this season, throughout the rest of the retool, and then hopefully into the contention window for the Blues? Before we start to break that down, I want to give the plugs one last time. If you'd like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, we'd appreciate that, as well as following and rating the podcast wherever you listen, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's a great way to help us out. And we try to do episodes at least once a week, very often twice a week. And we're hoping to do live streams soon. Very sorry we haven't been able to get that going, but we're working to moving to maybe a new software. So hopefully that'll be up soon. So thanks for bearing with us on that front. And then we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. So we'd appreciate if you would follow along there. But Alec, why don't we go ahead and talk about that question? What do you want to see from Montgomery beyond this season?
I want to see how he implements these young pieces, and I also want to see like how he works with Alex Steen to
Yeah,
better supplement this roster. Montgomery's familiar with this organization, with this franchise, how they run, and Alex Steen is supposedly learning, his way of doing things as well as like, or sorry, the team's way of doing things as well as sort of implementing his own. But yeah, I'm interested to see like what the conversations, if we get anything there, look like, and then mostly just looking forward. Like I think Snuggerud is going to be a huge piece of this team. Always
oh yeah,
was, as some might say our best prospect. Also, maybe hearing from Dvorsky, not this season, but maybe next season. But definitely, like in his tenure, Dvorsky
hmm
will be a feature piece of this team. How's
for
he going to
sure.
use him? How's he going to use guys like Stenberg or Pekarchik, who seems to be rising on everybody's board this off season?
hmm
So yeah, I mean, I'm curious to, as any retooling team would be, as to like how he's going to use the young players. So also like what the decisions are on some of these expiring contracts or soon to expire contracts on Broberg, on Holloway, on Texier is one that I'm still interested in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had a fantastic discussion a couple weeks ago with Mike Meyer breaking down some of those names that you just mentioned, the Blues prospect system. So go check that out. We also had a conversation with Sam from STL Analytics on Twitter during the summer. So a couple great prospect episodes there if anyone's interested. But yeah, I would totally agree. How he sort of emerges as a leader, what he can teach these young players, I think would be huge. Like one of the, I guess, knocks on Bannister is that he just hasn't been there in the same way that Montgomery has, right? Leading a contending team, being in the playoffs, and having an NHL record season when it comes to wins and points. So I think he could have a lot to teach some of these young guys. Um, in particular, the biggest thing on my end is it's pretty similar to your point. But I am, it's no secret, a Carolina Hurricanes enjoyer. I'm always Blues first, so don't worry. But I do like the Canes. And what I really like from that team is what we see from their head coach, Rod Brindamore. He has built a culture. He has built a system with that team, and it seems like no matter who you take out, they continue to be relevant. They continue to be a great team, at least during the regular season. Right? They lost Jake Gensel this offseason. They lost Brady Shea, but they continue to be one of the top teams in the league. And I think a big part of that is the culture and the system that Rod Brindamore has built there. The players buy in, they understand their roles, and they work together really as a team. And I think that's the kind of system that the Blues are going to need to use to become relevant again. They're not a team that's going to spend a lot, just like the Canes aren't either. I'm not saying that the Blues can be the Canes, not necessarily, but I'm just saying that that could be a model to pay attention to, and to aspire to do something like that. So really, what I want to see from Montgomery is implementing that system and building that culture for these young players, that winning culture, that could have a bigger impact on team success than any single player could. And so I'm really excited, and I'm really glad,
Yeah.
as you said, can't believe we got him. So glad he's here. So I think that's awesome. So that's really what I want to see from Jim Montgomery. Alec, this has been a lot of fun. It has me feeling sentimental. One of our very first episodes was after Drew Bannister was hired, and we broke that down. So here we are. We've lasted throughout the entire tenure of Drew Bannister as the sole head coach of the Blues. So um, what a ride it was. But as we said, Bannister's a good guy and a good coach. Hope he lands on his feet. But it's Monty season. Here we go. Really excited to see what happens. And if you want to keep up with us, I already mentioned the best ways to do that. But we're really excited to see how this Blues team adjusts, and how they progress into the future. So as I said, this was a fun one. We hope you'll return for the next episode of Note News and beyond. So we'll see you then. And as always, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.
Monty season, baby.